This is Dr. Stansel with a lecture on stating moral views. I will be asking you to state moral views, both your own and those of the authors that we read, and there are specific guidelines I want you to follow when doing that. This lecture covers those guidelines. There are a lot of ways that people state their moral views in everyday speech, and from the perspective of academic ethics, most of these are very vague. And vagueness isn't good because then we're not really sure what's being stated. Let's just look at some of these examples. How could you lie to her? This might be saying, it was morally wrong that you lied to her. Or it might really just be asking, how could you bring yourself to do it? How could you find the gumption? And that's a different question. Eating meat is bad. This might mean that eating meat is morally wrong, but it also might mean that eating meat is bad for your health or for the environment, or perhaps under the circumstances it was bad manners and we're really not sure. The third one, going back to school is the right thing to do. This is still vague because we're not sure if it means that going back to school would be good if you want and choose to do it, but you don't really have to do it. On the other hand, saying it's the right thing to do might mean that you are morally required to do this. From the statement, we can't be quite sure. In this course, I will have you read readings and state the moral view of the author, and also state your own moral views. And when you do that for me, I want you to do it in a way that is crystal clear. And so I ask students to use these basic templates here. These are fill in the blank templates, and there are 4 categories. The first one is morally required. Something is morally required if we must do it. We don't have any choice. If we want to do what is morally good, we have to do this. The second, morally allowable, means that the action in question it's okay for us to do if we want to or if we choose to, but we don't have to do it. The third, not morally allowable. This means it's always wrong for you to do it. You can't do it. It's always bad. And finally, supererogatory means that something is not required, it's allowable, it's morally allowable, but if you do it, you're going above and beyond normal moral expectations and you're doing something extra good. So the best example of something that is supererogatory is the behavior of the Good Samaritan in the well-known biblical story. So again, something is supererogatory when it goes above and beyond our normal moral requirements. It's something extra good. We're not required to do it because such a requirement would be too burdensome. Here are some examples, and what I've done for this slide is I took the blank templates I showed you on the previous slide and I filled in the blanks. So the first one, honesty is morally required. This means we must always be honest. We don't have a choice. Second one, marrying is morally allowable. It means that as far as morality goes, you may choose to get married and that's okay. You also may choose not to. Third one, marital infidelity is not morally allowable. Marital infidelity is cheating on your husband or wife, and this moral view says that cheating on your husband or wife is not morally allowable. This means it's never morally okay to do it. From the standpoint of morality, you must never do it. And finally, veganism is supererogatory. This moral view holds that being a vegan, which means to eat a diet with absolutely no animal products and also to live a lifestyle that avoids using animal products, is allowable, not required, but if someone chooses to do it, they're doing something extra good. Now, all four statements on this slide are moral views. And these are some examples of the kinds of views that we will be talking about. The basic templates for writing moral views that I just covered will work when someone is making a pretty simple claim about morality. When they are claiming that something is always morally required, always allowable, always not allowable, or always supererogatory. And we will find that we do often want to make claims like that apply always to all people in all circumstances. However, we will also find that we very often need to modify these basic templates to say something like this: blank is sometimes morally allowable. Blank is usually not morally allowable. So these fill in the blank templates here are okay, but it's much, much better to go ahead and state when or why or where something is or isn't allowable, required, not allowable, so on. So under the better category, blank is morally allowable when. And then we fill in, when is this action morally allowable? Blank is morally required for whom? We may need to talk about some actions or behaviors being morally required for certain people and not for others. For example, parents have special duties that non-parents don't have. Finally, blank is not morally allowable unless ... certain conditions hold true. There are many, many more of these. Let me go to the next slide and I'll show you some examples. Just a few examples here to give you the idea of what I'm talking about. Marriage is morally allowable when a person is of age. Disclosing STI, or sexually transmitted infection, status is morally required for people engaging in casual sex. This moral view holds that when people are engaging in casual sex, they must disclose their health status related to any sexually transmitted infections. What about people who aren't engaging in casual sex? According to this statement here, it doesn't say anything about those people, and they may not need to disclose their STI status. The last one, lying is not morally allowable unless telling the truth would result in harm or death. Now, these are just a few examples, and I also have not shown you all the possible ways to modify the basic templates that I gave you. But I think that you can see what I'm doing here is I'm starting with those four basic templates and I'm adding modifiers that talk about the circumstances, the groups of people, and so on, to whom the moral requirement or the moral prohibition applies. On this slide, I wanted to capture all the templates that are available for you to use when you state a moral view for me. And this might be your own moral view, or you might be stating the moral view of somebody else. So the first four on the slide are those basic formats, and these make absolute statements. So for the first one, it states that something is morally required, and it means it's always morally required. The second one states something is morally allowable, and it means it's always morally allowable for everyone in any circumstance, and so on for the first four. And then the last four, if you look at them, they are patterned off of the first four. But with these, at the end, you tag on when it's required or for whom, when it's morally allowable or for whom, and so on. I would really urge you to save this information somewhere where you can access it throughout the course, because I will always want you to use one of these templates when stating a moral view, and it'll be helpful if it's easy for you to find this whenever you need it. Finally, a tip. When you are stating a moral view for me, don't use the word because. The word because, the word since should never appear. Because indicates justification. Let me give you an example. Someone might say, vegetarianism is morally required because eating meat is detrimental to the environment. So when we use the word because and we say because eating meat is detrimental to the environment, we are providing justification for the moral view. We're giving a reason why the moral view is right. Now, in my course, I ask students to learn how to separate the moral view from its justification. So when I'm asking you to state a moral view, I just want the view and not any of the justification. We will also be learning about moral arguments and exploring those deeply. Moral arguments provide justification for moral views. So again, I will be asking you to state moral views, and when I do that, I just want the view. I don't want any justification for the view yet. I don't want the argument yet. I will also very often ask you for the argument, and that's where you'll share with me the justification for the view. We keep them separate.